Alright guys, Jameson and Alex here. Today we're going to be talking about the Path of the Infernal Barbarian from the Griffon's Saddlebag Book 2, which they have so graciously sponsored a series for all 12 of their subclasses. So if you want to get access to all those subclasses now, on top of tons of other content, homebrew, magic items, all kinds of awesome, crazy character options, stuff from them, check out the link in the description down below. We're going to go over the roleplay rating, combat rating, overall class synergy based on the abilities gained, how they improve on the base class abilities. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to be entered in our new D&D Beyond Players Bundle giveaway round.
Free stuff is very nice.
But all that being said, let's just jump straight into it, Alex. What do we get?
Level 3, we're starting off with the Hellfire Claw. One of your hands transforms into a large, fiery claw whenever you rage. Look at the artwork. It looks almost like it goes like a volcanic stone almost, kind of with it. It looks very, very menacing, and will come into play with the abilities we get later. However, the claw remains for the duration of your rage. If you're wielding a weapon with the clawed hand, whatever weapon it is, 2-hand, 1-hand, whatever, the flames harmlessly spread to the weapon, so it's not damaging you, which is very important. I know you're barbarian and all the health in the world, but there's no point taking meaningless damage. The first target you hit with this fiery weapon on each of your turns deals an extra 1d6 fire damage. If you don't deal this fire damage with a weapon attack on your turn, you can use a bonus action to make an unarmed strike with the claw, provided it's empty. On a hit, the target takes the normal damage from your unarmed strike, which can be either bludgeoning or slashing damage, plus an extra 1d6 fire damage. The claw's fire damage increases when you reach certain levels in this class, increasing to 1d8 at level 6, 1d10 at level 10, and then 1d12 at level 14.
Always like the scaling.
Scaling fire damage.
Also, at level 3, we have Hellborn. You learn to speak, read, and write either Abyssal or Infernal, your choice. Love that. In addition, you can add your strength modifier to any Charisma Intimidation or Charisma Persuasion check you make when interacting with fiends. When you reach 10th level, you can add your strength mod to any Charisma Intimidation check you make when interacting with any creature instead of only fiends. So, another little take on scaling that's a little bit different than some stuff we've seen before.
A scaling RP feature.
Yes,
I like it.
We'll get into that in the ratings portion.
Yeah. Next up is Infernal Warrior. At level 6, your Infernal Rage and Fire burns hot. Even when you're not raging, you gain resistance to fire damage. In addition, when you use the attack action to grapple a creature while you're raging, the target takes your Hellfire Claw's fire damage. If your grapple check succeeds, and again at the end of each of that creature's turn while it remains grappled. So you've got a built-in fire dot if you can hold on to somebody. Before
we get on to the last two abilities of the subclass, just want to give another shout out to our second sponsor, which is Hit Point Press and their newest Humblewood Tales Kickstarter, which is a companion series to their first Humblewood box set. So you're going to get 5 new adventures, levels 3 to 8. You get tons of magic items, some pre-built NPCs slash player characters, depending on how you want to use them, and all kinds of cool, interesting stuff there that ties into the world of Humblewood. So definitely worth checking out. Awesome stuff coming from them always. Check out the link in the description down below to get in on that. Then at level 10, we have Planar Conspirator, which you can make minor deals with an interested archfiend or similar power to peer into the minds of other creatures and exploit their fears. You can use an action to spend 2 hit dice, love it, without regaining any hit points to cast the Detect Thoughts spell. The DC for this spell equals 8 plus proficiency plus your con mod.
Yes.
So I love that. It's got the hit point die usage that goes with the con mod, which is very interesting, if anything.
And finally, at 14, we have Incinerating Wrath. When you take damage from a creature you can see within 60 feet of you while you're raging, you can use your reaction to release a punishing flame from your claw toward them, duplicating the effect of the Hellish Rebuke spell at the 3rd level. DC is 8 plus proficiency bonus plus your Constitution modifier again. And you can use this ability twice per rage.
There you go.
And again, clarification, we read through this and looked at it, it does specify that it is duplicating the effect of the Hellish Rebuke spell and is not saying you're casting the spell. So it is an ability, not something that's going to be countered via a counter spell or something like that.
And also, in contrast to the last ability, which does specify that you cast.
Correct.
So it is an important distinction on there.
Yep.
That being said, those are all the abilities gained in the subclass. I'll move on into the rating portion of the video. First up is the roleplay value, asterisk, as always. Talking about roleplay, we're talking about interacting with the world around you, interacting with NPCs, non-combat scenarios, avoiding combat, basically things outside of the initiative order.
Yes.
Not talking about your class fantasy, history, lore, background, that's on you as a player. Can't rate you, but we can rate the abilities gained in the subclass, how they might improve your potential in those role-play scenarios.
That's right.
So, all that being said, and which is typical with barbarians, is they tend to focus more on the combat side, which again rings true with this subclass.
They have an ability called Rage. I mean,
right. So Rage doesn't typically end well when it comes to social interactions. That being said, getting some free language options is always nice to have. Never bad to have some extra languages.
Well, and Abyssal and Infernal are some of those very specific. They very fit the flavor of what's going on with the subclass for sure. That it's very unlikely that somebody else would just happen to know those. Right. So not as common, but if they do come up, it can be very impactful that you know one of those two languages.
Yes, definitely. It's also niche use for the persuasion intimidation until you hit 10th level. Right. Because you're probably not going to be interacting with a lot of fiends under level 10 anyways.
Yeah, but you have a campaign that does for some reason. Correct. But in general,
there are some settings that definitely that can happen. But those tend to skew in the more dangerous CR ratings on there, for sure.
Yes.
So there is that. But being able to use it for everything once you hit level 10 is going to make it much more impactful, of course. And then, of course, lastly, we have the Detect Thoughts ability, which is solid. And there's a little bit of a cost to it, but, I mean, you're a barbarian, so what's hit points anyway to you? Not that big a deal.
So many of them.
And you can learn some really interesting information that your party would otherwise have no way to find out. Learning plans, spying, recon, all kinds of stuff can be learned from Detect Thoughts. So it is a pretty impactful roleplay spell. And it's a spell for Barbarian, which is really uncommon.
What is that?
That being said, there is some nicheness to a lot of these things on here, and there is some cost as well, like with the Detect Thoughts. So we just went with a 2.5 out of 5 for the roleplay. It's very thematic and flavorful, but not so much in the mechanics side.
The actual execution there's not a whole lot there. But with that being said, we get more to the fighting, punchy, kicky, cutting in half kind of things that barbarians like to do as a general rule. Yes. And that's where this spends more of its focus. Obviously, with the Hellfire Claw and the option to just give yourself a built-in kind of like it's not a magical weapon spell effect, but it's a fire damage buff that no matter what weapon you're using while you're raging, you can swing with extra fire damage, or you can even sock somebody or swipe at somebody with it if for some reason you weren't armed. You still have the option to kind of get in there and do some extra fire damage. Never a bad thing. Mm-hmm. We have to put the caveat, though, that it is fire damage. That,
it's probably the most resisted
of all the elementals for most likely. Fire and cold, definitely. And poison, probably, for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that does resist fire damage, especially when you get to higher CRs, obviously. But it does, and the damage itself does scale, which is good. Yes. Does it stay at 1d6 fire damage all the way to the end of time? And it hits a d12 by 14. Yeah. So it's not like it's d12 at level 18 or something. Right. Because like with any RPGs, when you level up in D&D, if you're doing it on a XP gain base, and there's a lot bigger gap between level 14 and 15 than there is level 4 and 5. Yeah. For sure. So those later levels are harder to come by, and a lot of campaigns don't make it that deep, which is the point we bring up in a lot of our videos. Your Hellborn ability is almost exclusively combat, exclusively RP, unless you really wanted to try to intimidate somebody into being afraid of you in combat. Maybe, but most likely not. The Infernal Warrior ability grabs my attention as something very interesting because it basically just gives you a further incentive to try to grapple and maybe build around being a grappling barbarian, even if you maybe weren't trying to pair it with monk. If not, you'd at least maybe take the grappler feat. Because
definitely an option.
Yeah, because you get it's not just taking fire damage when you instigate it, but they're taking that extra fire damage every single turn that you hold on to somebody, so you can really just make somebody stay miserable because you're hard to break out of a grapple for a lot of things. Yeah. At least it's medium or smaller.
At the very least, it's going to give you more reason to think about grappling every time.
Yeah, it gives a much more viable option besides just giving up your turn to try to grapple somebody else that you may or may not be able to. There's a much more value to that for sure. Mm-hmm. The Tech Thoughts thing is strictly RP, except for the fact that it may gather you information that you could use in combat. Yeah, but that's about the extent of that. And of course, the Incinerated Wrath thing I really love as an ability because it is twice per rage, and then there is a point where you get so many rages per day that if you've used both and you're still in the same combat and you want to just re-rage so you can get it back, you can. And so that's cool. That's an interesting usage rate. Almost everything is, per rest, whether short or long rest, or use is based on a modifier, whether it's proficiency or a stat. This is just twice per rage. So I like that. It's very barbarian-y. But again, it is fire damage. So a lot of what you're doing, if you're going to get something that is resistant to fire damage, or heaven forbid immune to fire damage, a lot of what you're able to do in terms of extra offense, with the exception of just, you can grapple, but you're not getting the extra fire damage. It does limit you way.
Yeah, pretty much. If they're immune, it pretty much just shuts down your abilities.
Pretty much. So there are some limits there, obviously, if you're fighting something that is resistant or immune to fire damage. So we went with a 3.5 out of a possible 5. Very, very flavorfully fit together. It definitely has its lane, and it lives and charges right through it.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing I do like, too, about the capstone as well, which I'll kind of tie into synergy a little bit here, so transition. With that is it gives the Barbarian some alternative uses for ranged combat, because that's one thing Barbarians tend to be their biggest weakness is that ranged combat, because you're very limited with strength-based ranged options. So you're going to have 60-foot range for the Hellish Rebuke effect, which is going to give you some retaliation damage to get you some ways to engage stuff that's further away from you if you're otherwise having difficulties getting to it.
And it is 60 feet, too. It's not 30 feet like a lot of other abilities I've seen kind of like this, or other, subclass abilities are. That 60 feet's a pretty good range, and with your movement, bonuses you're gonna have as a barbarian, you can cover that ground and get almost anything in range most of the time.
Yes, and another thing going with that we did touch on is it ties into your rage.
Yes.
Which rage, it just is barbarian. Like, that is their thing. It's what makes them unique as a class.
Yeah, not every class has that thing. Clerics have Channel Divinity, but Paladins also have it.
Don't get me started about Rangers.
Rogues have Sneak Attack. It's kind of their thing. Monks have Key Points. It's their thing.
Yeah.
But Barbarians have Rage, and no one else has Rage.
Exactly. It gets the offensive and defensive options, and this ties into that quite a bit with the synergy on here. So the bonus action attack is a nice option as well with the Claw, because you might maybe you miss both of your weapon attacks, and you're like, well, I'm just going to take an offhand, unarmed strike to get that in there. Or you just want to make 3 attacks in a turn, which is definitely possible, because I did double check in the rules as well. With a two-handed weapon, even if you do have a two-handed weapon, you can hold the weapon in one hand. You just can't make attacks with it. So you could attack, and then
grab
drop a hand and slash at him and still be effective for those stickler DMs on there. It is definitely possible to do. And, of course, with unarmed strikes, you get 1d4 plus your bonuses and everything on top of that as well. So it's going to be a little bit more damage if you can get all 3 attacks to hit. But, of course, that's assuming all 3 attacks to hit. So it's going to probably be pretty break even a lot of times.
And even if they don't, it's another opportunity, another chance to hit.
I do like that. I think that it's nice to have that option, for sure. So all of that being said, again, the grapple burn adds more utility, incentive to do it, and it's going to help you get more into the fray and want to maybe focus a little bit more on utility than you otherwise would initially think to as a barbarian.
Yeah, especially as a barbarian, right.
But there is limitations with that as well with the size categories. You can only grapple so big of things. All that being said, we gave it a 4 on synergy out of 5. There's lots of synergy with rage and, the hit die with uses for that, and grapple, extra utility, stuff like that.
Considering Wrath helps you address, the range weakness that barbarians have, and anytime we're looking at, especially with synergy, how are you addressing, weaknesses for the base class, and how are you playing with the abilities that the base class already has, making them better or giving them more options to play around.
And the last thing I look at is effectiveness of it, and that's why it's only a 4. 4 is still a very solid score, but again, it is fire damage. There are limited uses to all of these.
If this was all like psychic damage, it'd be hi there. Hi there.
Very, very much more impactful.
But then it wouldn't be called Path of the Infernal. It'd be Path of the whatever else, something else.
Cyanide. Cyanide Barbarian.
Sure, why not?
Well, that is all of the stuff for this subclass, guys. Again, thank you to Griffon Saddlebag for doing a sponsored series. We read through all of these. There's 12 awesome subclasses.
Yeah.
Really great.
And just being upfront and honest, there are a few that I'm like, oh, this is neat.
There are, I think, probably 2 or 3 of them that are some of my favorite of any subclass we've reviewed. So we'll get to those.
We will get to those.
So some really cool stuff in here, guys. So definitely worth a look for that. And, of course, Humblewood Kickstarter with the Humblewood Tales. The first one was awesome. Great content, great art, great flavor, lore in the world. So they're just building even more on that. It's definitely worth a look at the very least, guys. Make sure you check out those links down below. And always appreciate you guys leave comments. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notifications to know when our new videos are coming out. We got our new round of giveaways. We got a bunch of stuff coming with these sponsored stuff.
And there's other things in the pipe. So
there are lots of things in the pipe.
yeah,
So stay tuned. And as always, thanks for watching.